Good evening, everybody. Can I kindly ask if one of you could please, kind of confirm if you can hear me, especially. I know you can see my screen because I know you can see my screen because see here. I don't know what's happening with my microphone here. For some weird reason, it doesn't seem to be working. My external microphone, I mean. Okay, so I see a couple of thumbs up. It's unfortunate that my my external microphone is not working here. I have no idea why this is the case, but as long as you can hear me, that is what is important, I think, in my opinion. Try and see if I can figure things out later on afterwards. It's very strange here. We swap the ports perhaps. This will help. Maybe not. Yeah, probably need to do a reboot or something. All right, so on with it then. We want to continue our discussion of project management. If you remember, we had gotten to a stage where we started discussing how we go about decomposing your typical project. I also want to remind us as to why we are having this conversation. So we are having this conversation because we want to get to a stage where we are all in a position where we can actually plan to execute our research projects, our respective research projects. But prior to starting our discussion of project decomposition, we discussed a broad spectrum of activities as they relate to project management, right? So the range of activities that are performed as part of project management, quite a number of them, but perhaps the more pertinent ones as they relate to what we're going to cover in 2034 are things like risk management, project planning, for instance. Okay. And I directed you to the PEM box of project management body of knowledge, if you remember. We had fun going through this interesting planning process workflow, which takes in as input constraints and identified risks and a series of tasks, milestones, and deliverables. Using these three things, you can derive your project schedule. Once you derive or define your project schedule, you notice here we're saying we use a project planner, which is a system, a piece of software, to derive this schedule. Of course, we feed it the input related to our project. More on that when we look at Project Libre. You use this schedule to actually go through a continuous process where you regularly monitor the progress of the project. And the reason is simple, right? You want to make sure that you don't run out of time, you don't run out of money, and all those things. Anyways, we also had a discussion of planning assumptions and the importance of risk mitigation, right? And then finally, we set the stage for kind of like all this process of project scheduling. The fact that what you do as fundamental, what you're doing as part of project scheduling is you're decomposing the project into its constituent tasks, right? And in addition, after you decompose the project, after you identify these functional units, if we can call them that, what you do is you estimate the time and resources required to complete each and every one of those tasks identified. And typically the recommendation is that you optimally organize these tasks such that you execute the project in the shortest possible period of time. And the strategy that is recommended is decoupling. So this notion that you want to reduce the interdependencies amongst the various tasks. You do not want a situation where you have a lot of tasks that are dependent on other tasks before they can be executed. Okay. Anyways, and then more importantly, we made mention of the fact that you see the this whole notion of project scheduling is the responsibility of project management team, and typically the person who heads that project management team, your so-called project manager, would use their intuition, experience, and skill set, right, to come up with an optimal schedule, if you will. Anyway, now just a thing about the so-called scheduling process, like what you have to do for you to, if your interest is just to attend this class so that you're able to generate a Gantt chart or a timeline for a project, it turns out that the process is simple, right? You start off by identifying the activities associated with your project. Now, these activities will come from the decomposition process. Once you identify the activities, you identify any dependencies that may exist amongst the various tasks or activities. Once you do that, you come up with an estimate of the resources that will be required for the resource. Once you estimate the resources, you allocate roles or people to these activities. Once you do the allocation, you would then create your project management artifacts. So your Gantt chart, your work breakdown structure, your activity network diagrams, your RACI metrics, a whole range of things here. Now, what's crucial here is before you start or initiate this project scheduling process, what you must do is you must ensure that you include the comprehensive set of activities. All of the activities must be included. In our case, we are actually making reference to obvious things such as, well, we're going to have something like the methodology. Let's say we're starting from the methodology or something. In fact, since this is going into the project proposal, I'll just say you start off with the research proposal. Okay. So you identify the various, summary tasks, if we can call them that, right? You have all the methodology or something. You have the data analysis. If you want, you can have interpretation of findings or something. If you want, you can have report writing. Now, each one of these distinct phases here, it turns out, is associated with subtasks activities. In here, you can say formulate research problem, conduct preliminary literature synthesis, prepare project management artifacts. Use a draft research proposal. I'm making things up here. There's stuff that probably is not supposed to be there, stuff that is missing, but you get the point, right? Then you could say research proposal, document. Here you could say literature synthesis document. What I've showcased here, ladies and gentlemen, is the decomposition process. I have decomposed the research proposal activity. Okay. Anyway, so what we are saying is that assuming we did this for all of these high-level phases here, what we'll be saying is we'd use these things here, all these activities, as input. Okay. But before we can generate the charts, what we would have to do is we'd have to identify the dependencies. Like, I'll be the first one to tell you to say, you cannot conduct a literature synthesis before you formulate your research problem. Yeah, you cannot you cannot start drafting the research proposal before you conduct a comprehensive, or you could do it, I guess, but you can't produce a research proposal document without exhausting your literature synthesis exercise or literature review exercise. So all of these are dependencies that you'd be identifying. You identify any sort of intertask dependencies that may exist here. And then you estimate the resources required, right? Afterwards, once you're done with that, you use this as input to generate any sort of plots or charts or graphs that will collectively constitute so-called project management artifacts. You see, you must appreciate something about project scheduling, right? It's not easy to estimate, and I deliberately I've been giving you examples, real-world examples, so that this sticks with you. Estimation is not an exact science, and so you have to take that into account here. Can be a challenge because if your estimation is off here, you end up underestimating how much money is required. And before the project is finalized, you run out of money. What do you do? Yeah. Something else that's worth mentioning here is the fact that, productivity is not proportional to the total number of people working on the task. And this point, I don't know if it's with your group here, probably not, but here's the thing here. If you're five of you, 5 team members, and let's say you realize, research proposal will take one person 10 days. It doesn't necessarily mean that you just divide these 10 days by 5 people and you say, well, if all 5 people are working on the project, it will take us 2 days. That's what we mean by saying productivity is not proportional. Okay? People work at different, people have different skill levels, the pace at which they work is different, and all those things. So you want to be very careful about this, the fact that productivity is not proportional. And maybe something else worth mentioning here is, and we've been going through this with my third-year students, right? This notion that adding people to be a part of your research project in this particular case at an advanced stage of the project is a bad idea. Because of communication overheads, you end up with a situation where you have delays. And more importantly, as it relates to risk management here, bad things always happen, right? So what we're saying here is that the unexpected always happens. You always want to prepare contingency plans, workarounds, plan Bs as they call them, so that in the event that that thing happens, you at least you can seamlessly continue with the research project. Now, the preferred way of representing project schedules is using graphical notations, okay? In part because generally they're intuitive and they tend to help you kind of compress information, making it a lot easier for people to understand the information you're trying to convey here. So these graphical notations will typically showcase how the project is broken down into smaller manageable tasks, these units of work called tasks, if you remember. But you must remember also that these tasks shouldn't be too small. And what we mean by tasks shouldn't be too small here is, you see, if I come here and I say the research proposal, there we go. I say, well, conduct a preliminary literature synthesis, okay? Then you go out there and you're like, I'm going to, I don't know what. I'm going to conduct, you're decomposing it further, right? Like you have level 1 here. And then you have 1.1. This is 1.2. Then you decide to say, well, I'm going to have a sub-activity tied to 1.1 and say conduct literature synthesis for objective 1. Nothing wrong with this, but you see, these things shouldn't be too small, right? Is what we mean. I mean, I guess this would work actually. You're decomposing it so that you have this level that looks at conducting literature review for each specific objective. But what would be very sad, and quite frankly speaking here, a bit odd here, if you decided to say, oh, as part of objective number 1, you're then going to add another subtasks, right? .2.1.1, and then you say conduct literature synthesis for, like, you're trying to decompose it further, say conduct literature synthesis for period hour, for instance. And then you have something else that says conduct literature synthesis for band-aid hour or something. That would be weird here. Not really weird, but the idea here is you don't want this decomposition here to get out of hand, is what we're saying. And typically, a rule of thumb here is you decompose these projects down to a level such that you can easily assign what you've decomposed to an individual to work on. A task that you can easily manage. Right? So don't overdo this. And depending on the sort of literature that you'll be reading, there are certain numbers that are thrown around. Like, for instance, there'll be recommendations like make sure that these tasks that you're decomposing don't take less than a week, right? They should take at least a week or 2, is what they're saying. Now, these are not really set in stone, right? But these are guidelines that will ultimately help you come up with, I guess, a project management artifact or graphical notation that makes logical sense. Logic is important here. Now, it turns out that there's a range of these project scheduling artifacts that you can use. Like, for instance, we have so-called calendar-based visualizations or graphical project scheduling artifacts, if you will. Typically, these calendar-based artifacts will be used to represent your project schedule in order to showcase your schedule as a series of activities and resources against time. So what you notice for the Gantt chart, for instance, is it's really excuse me, sorry. There's an agent call I need to pick up here, and I'll have to apologize upfront. Hello. Sorry about that. There's an agent call I had to pick up there. Right. So, if you look at your calendar-based notation, what you begin to notice is that this thing is typically presented on an XY plane, right? Where your y-axis will represent your tasks and activities, and then your x-axis will be the time, for instance. Okay. And then you have activity networks. We're just going to focus our attention on calendar-based notation here, but you have your activity networks where your task, or rather visualization itself, showcases dependencies that exist amongst your different tasks, right? So it's like a dependency graph that you're drawing that showcases to you which tasks are dependent on other existing tasks, if you will. And then obviously, it's worth mentioning that in as much as some of the examples I've been showcasing hint at the fact that you can create these visualizations using simple tools like in this particular case, Microsoft Excel, for instance, or LibreOffice Calc query. It turns out that there are software tools that are specifically designed to enable you to create these visualizations or annotations. So I'm going to go walk you through some of these popular tools here. Start off with Project Libre, and incidentally, Project Libre is going to be the tool I'm going to use as an example myself, and I believe this is a tool that Miss Mwanza is going to use as well. Okay. So the idea behind Project Libre is it's actually marketed as I guess a free and open source alternative to Microsoft Project. Microsoft Project is perhaps one of the most well-known tools, right? Project management tools out there. Okay. What you want to do at your own time, you want to go to projectlibre.com and poke around. Last time I checked, they were trying to attempt to beta test the cloud-based version of Project Libre. I'm not really sure how far they've gone with that, but what I tend to do myself is I use a desktop version of Project Libre. It's a very trivial tool, really very easy to use. A user-friendly interface it has, and the idea behind Project Libre is you ideally use it to create not just your Gantt chart really, but things like weight breakdown structure and your resource breakdown structure, for instance. And in fact, it's so versatile that you can actually use it to attach resources to specific tasks, right? So there's Project Libre. In our next class, I'm going to demonstrate exactly how you would go about using Project Libre, right? Yeah, so like I said, it's marketed as an alternative to Microsoft Project. It's open source, it's freely available. It's quite popular also. If you just look it up, you just go on YouTube and you search for Project Libre, you'll notice that there's tons and tons of videos, right, centered around this. There are also other tools like Fang Office, for instance. In as much as this is it's a premium service, but there's a free tier which ideally would be sufficient for our needs in 2034. So at your own time, I do encourage you to go to fangoffice.com. And what you notice, if you look at the examples I'm giving here in terms of visualization, I'm showcasing how your typical Gantt chart or timeline would be generated using these different tools, right? And in as much as the aesthetics are different, the idea, the fundamental idea is the same. On your y-axis, you have your tasks. On your x-axis, that's on the top, you have your time, right? Depending on the sheer size of the project, this time could be segmented in weeks, in months, or even in quarters, for instance, or years, actually. Okay? And also, you'll notice here that your xy plane here, your 0,0 is on the top left corner, ideally. There's also tools like Lucid Chart. One of the reasons why I would recommend a tool like Lucid Chart is because it fosters collaboration, right? So it makes it relatively easier for you to collaboratively create this Gantt chart. If you're using a tool like LibreOffice, either you'd have to wait for a colleague who's working on it to send you the saved changes, or you'd probably have to cluster around a single computer or something like that. All right. So there's Lucid Chart. Again, if you look at the type of visualizations that you have with Lucid Chart, the idea is the same, but the aesthetics here are certainly way better than tools like LibreOffice. Tools like Fang Office, for instance, and Project Libre, right? But really, the goal is not to create something that is beautiful. It's something that makes logical sense, something that best represents your project timeline. And then, of course, there's Microsoft Project. I always tell students that in the case of Microsoft Project, one of the incentives for why you'd want to use this tool really is so that, or rather, it's because it's one of the most widely used tools. It's a popular tool. So if you go out there in industry, there's a high likelihood that you will find people using this particular tool, Microsoft Project. Okay. There are also other tools like Open Project. There's a number of project management tools. So I'm throwing some of these things there so that at your own time you can take a look at what is available and see what perhaps would be ideal for you or something. Okay. Anyways, more tools here. Jira, for instance, and all those things. What we normally do in these other kind of like courses is we introduce students to a completely different tool here. There's a tool called Trello. I mean, I'm just putting it out there so that you know that there are other modern tools that you can take advantage of. But for the purposes of 2034, really, to be honest, we're going to focus on Project Libre or something, right? Anyway, the other thing worth mentioning here is that if you are a bit apprehensive about tooling, right, about using these fancy or sophisticated tools, what you can do is you can actually use a plain old spreadsheet. Like in this particular case, I'm just showcasing. If you just look up, easy Gantt chart templates or something, you should be able to come across a Google Sheets template that you can adapt and be able to generate your own Gantt chart in this particular case. Okay, although it becomes difficult here to monitor when you're using a tool like this, right? So a broad spectrum of tools, here. Now, just to mention here, back to our discussion of decomposition of the project here, there was mention of activities and tasks and all those things. Well, it turns out that your so-called project activity itself is a basic planning element that you use for you to construct these project management artifacts. And typically, an activity is associated with a duration in calendar days, weeks, or months. So there's a time tied to the activity. Whenever you make mention of duration here, you're talking about things like start time and start date and end date. An activity is associated with an effort estimate. In other words, you'd have to come up with an estimation of the total number of persons. I'm sorry? I don't know what that was. I don't know if it's a question or something, but probably mute your microphone unless if you have a question or something. Right? So your effort estimate looks at the person months or person days required to complete a unit of work. Right? So it's like if you've identified that one of the tasks that you're going to have to perform is to conduct a preliminary literature synthesis. How many person days or person months are required to complete that unit of work? Okay. Of course, I mean this deadline is tied to the duration, is it? I want to argue so your duration is the calendar days required. You have the effort, and then you have the deadline, right? By when should you complete this activity or something? And more importantly here, an activity must have a defined endpoint. In other words, there must be an output. There must be something that results from an activity. It's like when you are formulating research problems, what is going to come out of here? When you draft your research proposal, what's going to come out of here? Well, we know that when you draft a research proposal, the output is going to be the research proposal document. When you are conducting a literature synthesis, you could say the end result is you're going to complete the literature synthesis, which is a milestone. So these defined endpoints are special types of tasks that we've been referring to as milestones and deliverables. Okay. I think there's a question from Oliver.
So in terms of the duration date, I'm kind of finding it like, okay, we as a group are kind of finding having troubles in calendar dates, weeks, or months. So, like, from the time when you give us the research to the time of the deadline, that's when we should make up this Gantt chart, or how is it supposed to be structured exactly? I'm kind of lagging behind on this one.
Well, I mean, I'd flip the question and ask you a question. When did, from your perspective, when did you start working on this research problem, the problems you chose?
Last month, sir.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's last month or something, but you started working on these things when you selected project teams, right? When you selected topics. That's when you started working on this. And so what you're doing when you're preparing your research proposal is you're including time that you spent formulating the problem and all those things. So if you're thinking of, if your question is tied to what should be the start period of the project, it's when you were given these problems to work on, when you selected your teams. And it's quite easy for you to kind of like figure this out, right? All you do is you look at emails that I've sent out, right? Which have focused on assignments, right? So in this particular case, we see that the very first assignment where you were, let's just say, choosing topics was proposal presentation. This is 2024, it's supposed to be here. This was, we would say it's April 16th, right? So your timeline is going to have to start from April 16th, and it's going to have to end on September 12th, right? Because September 12th is the last day of exams. Sorry, last day of classes. Okay. Anyways, yeah. Again, we just made mention of these defined endpoints, is it? These defined endpoints have been identified as milestones and deliverables. And the difference between, as much as all of them.
Yes. Sorry, sir. I have a question again concerning the project Libro. Is it that in our proposal, are we going to include that project Libro Gantt chart, or maybe like I overheard you saying, no, you'll be telling us more on how to use it in the next class. So like in our proposal, the one which we are submitting on Monday, are we supposed to include the Gantt chart or not?
Well, I mean, you're supposed to include the Gantt chart, right? And all other project management artifacts. The assessment is going to have to be pushed. We are pushing it forward because we still need to discuss these other important metrics here. We're pushing it forward to the 1st of August because it's not realistically possible for us to finish this discussion and stuff. So yeah, if your question was, is the deadline still the 28th or something? The deadline will be extended to the 1st. So I have a few more days to finalize this. Okay.
All right, sir. Thank you so very much.
Yeah. All right. Anyways, so just to kind of mention here, right, that one of the very first things that you do before you can, come up with these sophisticated, project management artifacts, scheduling artifacts here is you have got to decompose the project, right? And it turns out that decomposition of the project is best done by using what's called a work breakdown structure, right? And the idea behind the work breakdown structure is you identify all of the comprehensive set of activities associated with your project, including the associated efforts, so it's person months or person days we spoke about. You identify the durations, and then any type of dependencies. Okay, so you'd have an input similar to what you're seeing on the screen here. Now, one of the things that I want to draw attention to here is you begin to notice that there's something very strange here when you start comparing things like person days and duration, right? It's like, why is it that the same task has an effort of 15 days, but the duration is 10 days? And then on the flip side here, you have something like, so it's like the effort is more compared to the actual duration. But at the same time, you have certain tasks like task number 9, for instance, where the effort is 10 days, but the duration, the amount of time it's going to take here is like 15 days, right? Well, the simple answer to this is there are certain instances that this effort would not really take into account things like holidays. So it's like you're saying, for us to work on task 9, we will need exactly 10 days. But we know that, like in a place like Zambia, if that 10 days spans weekends, for instance, Saturdays and Sundays, you won't count Saturdays and Sundays. You understand? So as a result, you have a situation where the effort is less than the duration. And then, interestingly enough, you have instances where the effort is more than the duration. This makes sense, right? Because in some instances, when you realize that you're going to take significantly longer to work on something, like 15 days, you would allocate more resources to this task. So instead of allocating one person, you'd say we're going to allocate 2 people. And as a result, because you have 2 people working on the task, they're going to take far less than the effort required. So this is an explanation for those that have a keen eye and notice that, wait a minute, the numbers here are a bit off, right? So your work breakdown structure really, like I said, is what is used as a basis to create your project schedule, like your timeline or your Gantt chart, right? In fact, even the activity diagram, activity network diagram. It turns out that this work breakdown structure, WBS, is deliverable oriented. So you create some structure that clearly identifies the deliverables associated with your project, right? And then it turns out that the work breakdown structure, the WBS here, will organize these project activities into manageable tasks, right? The focus is on activities, deliverables, and the timings associated with these activities, right? And then we see here that the project tasks would typically be represented in a hierarchy, right? And I'll showcase a hierarchy. It's something similar to this, for instance, for what you may call graphical notation of the work breakdown structure, right? You can use a tabular notation and all those things here. Okay. And this brings us to this last point here, where we're saying you can represent this work breakdown structure using a tabular notation, textual notation, or graphical notation, right? But it turns out that the most popular way of representing a work breakdown structure is something akin to this here. Okay. And really, in terms of the elements that comprise your so-called work breakdown structure, we see that at the very top would be the project itself, right? Like in this example here, we're saying aircraft system. In your respective projects, it would be the name or the topic you're working towards here. Like sanitation at Ridgeway campus or something like that. All right? That's like your level 1. And then your level 2 will represent these high-level tasks, right? These are called summary tasks. In other words, if you think about the conversations we've had so far, these summary tasks would correspond to the maybe distinct phases we discussed in the research cycle, right? Problem formulation, and all those things. Or you can devise your own structure, if you will, okay? And then from the summary tasks, you then identify the so-called subtasks, is it? So the things that come after the summary task would be the smallest units of work. In some instances, I mean, you could further decompose those things, all right? But the idea here is that the subtasks are derived from the summary tasks. And then what you also have are so-called work packages, they're actually deliverables, right? This would be like the leaves of your tabular structure. So at the end, this is a horrible example, but these things that are represented in text here would be what we are calling the work packages, if you will, right? Propulsion, airframe, and all those things. Anyways, and then we see here that within your WBS, you would have your recurring tasks, is it? So there are things that will happen often, like meetings. There are certain things that you do over and over again, maybe you decide as a team that you're going to be meeting every week on a Friday. That's a recurring task. It's a task, right? You're going to spend X amount of hours or minutes on that particular activity. Although that activity is a special type of task, is it? It's a milestone because the duration is 0. Okay. So the recurring tasks, in as much as we're representing them as being separate entities here, but they are milestones ideally. Okay. Now, when you're creating the WBS, you have got to start off with the project name, and then in level 2, right, with the summary task is where the enumeration happens, the numbering. So in other words, when you have something like this, at the very beginning of this structure is the name of the project, but the numbering will begin at level 2. So in other words, if you look at what we have here, right, it's like we're saying, I'm giving you an example of like a work breakdown structure for the 3020 course here. The name of the project is ICT 3020 assessments. And we see here that in level 2 here, we are categorizing the different types of assessments, right? We have tests, we have a group-based project. This is where the enumeration happens. So we're saying 1 is class theory test, 2 is group project. And then everything that is derived from test is going to be used, or the enumeration is going to latch onto class theory test summary task. So class theory test number 1 will be enumerated as 1.1, and class theory test will be 1.2. If you have, a sub tasks that are derived from level 3, because the project is level 1, summary task is level 2, what follows is level 3. If you have level 4, the enumeration is changed accordingly, right? If you notice under planning here, we have 2.1.1 as being the proposal document, for instance. A subtle thing, but important nonetheless as you are working on this. So just to mention here, right, that when we meet next time, I don't know if we have class tomorrow, maybe not, but when we meet next time, we are going to walk you through how to create. I think we still have time here. We can probably discuss this. I was looking at the time here. My next meeting is only at 19, so I have time here. I'm going to pause here and just find out if there are questions about the work breakdown structure. Okay.
So, Doctor, the assignment that we're writing in Google Docs, when we're done writing it in Google Docs, should it be deleted in there, or should it remain in there and then we convert that document into a PDF? After that, can we make it as a PowerPoint presentation file so that everything should be well summarized?
No, so the assignments are quite clear, right? You don't delete files in the Google Doc in your shared folders, right? They leave. That's supposed to be used as a staging area for everything that you're doing. You mustn't delete anything. However, for certain assessments, you have to do 2 things. Once you're done creating a document in Google Docs, you upload it to the Moodle, right? So do not delete anything. Those things are supposed to be there. Yeah.
Oh, all right, sir. All right.
Yeah.
So, sir, about
Sir,
final question, sir.
Yep.
About the recording, one of the requirements needed, like for recording. How is the whole process like?
What do you mean? How is the whole process like?
In terms of recording, one of the requirements that were needed, you were saying that recording.
No, you create a
is needed.
screencast. You create a recording
Is
of the
needed. Is there a
presentation.
particular software?
Yeah, but we had a discussion about this. I don't know if you missed class, right? I walked you through a range of tools that you can use, right? I said you can use OBS, you can use vocal screen, right? You can use Google Meet, you can use Zoom. So you probably want to speak to your colleagues that were attending classes. I think I walked you through a series of tools, and I was joking to say some of you probably are content creators and you know how to do these things. They're probably more sophisticated tools that you can use out there. So you want to look at the previous lecture series, which is lecture series number 6. There are links there to tools that you can use as a team, including presentation software.
Sure thing, sir. Thank you.
Are there any other questions, by the way? I'm looking at the time. We were supposed to have a makeup last week. We didn't. I want to reach out to the course reps for us to organize a lecture over the weekend. to make up for the time when we were having those presentations here. So I want to propose a class here on the weekend, on Saturday or Sunday. I'll reach out to the two course reps and then you can choose a slot. Yes, Mushi.
Yes, sir. I think I've got a problem with my colleagues in the group. Actually, not actually problem with them, but there's a problem. We're failing to access the Google Docs. I think we tried accessing it. It was telling us to wait for access from you.
Send emails. That's what your friends have been doing. I've actually been
I think
responding to the entire group. Send a
we,
list of all people with their email addresses and mention, because I walked you through a process we are following, right? Early on in the process, around February, we asked you to provide us with your email addresses. So we're using those email addresses. And we noticed that a number of you never bothered to do that. So probably it's likely that your group never did that. So if you're unable to access, just drop me an email and say, these are the email addresses of our project team members. Please add us to project team X folder or something. Or you
all
can
right.
do what your colleagues are doing, right? When you access and you're unable to access, you request for access. And
All
then
right.
I've
So
been granting access. Yeah.
then the other question is, sir, in the time of using the Google Docs, how do we? I'm trying to understand how we can upload, let's say, a word processor to the Google Docs. Is everything provided there, or we're supposed to like get something like a Word or use our computers or phones? Which one's which?
Yeah, no one is going to provide you with anything. Part of the assignment is you're creating this yourselves, right? So from Google Docs, you just upload you upload a document, and then or you can create it even with your phone, right? When you go to the folder itself, there's a plus button in the bottom right. You
Yes.
click on it, and then you say Google Docs, and then that's it. Boom. But a good starting point would be for you to download the template, and then you upload the template, and then you use the template as a basis for rather than starting from scratch.
So the template's supposed to be downloaded on Google Docs.
No, the template is downloaded from the APA website, APA website.
API. Wait, right, sir.
APA website. Yes. More questions? Hello? Okay, I guess there are no questions. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is 6:48. We can leave it at that. I want to see you guys hopefully on Saturday or Sunday or something, and I'll send an update regarding the assessment here. It's going to be pushed to Friday. Thank you very much and good night.